Hi, this is Doma. Welcome back to my channel of Books and Soul. So this week I wanted to talk to you about a book written by Clive Staples Lewis, A Grief Observed. I thought it would be interesting to talk about this book in November because November is a month when we usually do think about our dear ones who have passed away. So this is the reason why I chose this book, and I thought C.S. Lewis would be a great person to help us look at this topic of grief this month. He is known for his acute observations, a very rational and clear mind, and he has also experienced grief himself. This short little book is actually a set of his reflections that he compiled right after his wife died. He even said so himself that writing these things down, writing his reflections and feelings down, was a way for him to survive this really hard moment and difficult moment in his life. It's very interesting to note that the title of this book is A Grief Observed. So basically C.S. Lewis is talking about his own experience of sorrow and grief after the death of his wife. And he in no way says that his experience is the same as that of any one of us, really. I think this book can be read by anyone who wants to know C.S. Lewis more, anybody who wants to understand their friends, maybe who have lost someone, anybody who wants to even, just understand this experience of grief. But it will probably be most appreciated by those who have in some way experienced grief already, or are experiencing it, or are dealing with the death of a loved one. I decided to read this book because, first of all, I really esteem C.S. Lewis. I think he's a brilliant man and things he writes are just great. He's very smart, he is clever, witty. I also picked this book up because 3 years ago I lost my dad, and I thought that reading C.S. Lewis and his experience of grief would help me in some way to understand what I'm experiencing, and also to find another person, a person that I look up to a lot, who has gone through what I'm experiencing right now and can be helpful or can offer new insights into some of the things that perhaps for me are still unclear, or can offer hope in many moments as well. Even though C.S. Lewis talks about his own personal experience of grief, there are a few points and a few questions that he raises that can be useful to anyone, to any reader of this book, I think. This is because in his reflections, he talks about, suffering, he talks about death, obviously, he talks about sorrow, love, he talks about the absence or the presence of God, he looks at mourning, he looks at remembering the person who has passed away. So he touches on a lot of themes that are crucial in any case, but just come out more maybe to the forefront when a person is experiencing such big suffering and pain and sorrow after the death of a loved one. So one of the things with which C.S. Lewis struggles is preserving the memory of the person that he has lost, in this case, his wife. He's afraid that with time he will forget how his wife was, what she looked like, how she acted, how she laughed, how she smiled, how she was on an everyday basis. And he's worried that he will create this imaginary person in his mind and forget the real person. So clearly here he is yearning for this real presence of this person that he can no longer have. He's worried that his memory with time will just become super vague, or that he will replace it with something that's not real. Like in some way, he will make his wife into something that she wasn't. At the beginning of his writings in this book, this is a real big problem that he has, and just like a really great internal struggle. As we go on in this book, we see that this thought stays with him, but it develops, and he actually seems to find a solution to this problem. He also notices how his relationships with others have been marked by the fact that he has lost someone. So there are moments, he says, when he realizes that he's kind of an embarrassment to others. Others don't know how to approach him, they don't know what to say. And he himself even says that, sometimes he's angry if people don't say anything, don't acknowledge the fact that his wife died, but sometimes he's angry if they do. For him, grief and being in the state of grief is actually a very tricky moment in life, because there's a big confusion and just chaos of feelings going on. He says that grief is characterized by anger, confusion, laziness sometimes, shame once you start to, let's say, feel better. One of the key questions that C.S. Lewis asks is also, where is God in all of this? He makes this point that when we are happy, we don't really go looking for God. We kind of find him, we see that he's there, we're happy. Once something bad happens to us, it almost seems like we're asking for help, we're crying out, and there's no one on the other side. He talks about this silence, basically feeling as if God shut the door on him and left him alone in this suffering. All of these thoughts lead him to a reflection on whether God is good or not good. And it also makes him question his own faith, his own beliefs. As a Christian, he took it for granted that he does believe that there is life after death and that we can pray for those who have left us. But in this moment of grief, he actually begins questioning his belief. Once the stakes are so high, because he has lost someone that he loves so much, he begins to notice that his belief system is a bit wobbly and maybe not as stable as he thought it was. He also asks about suffering. Why would a good God let suffering into the world? Why is there suffering? He looked at his wife, he watched her suffer, and he asks why. Why was this necessary? The interesting point that C.S. Lewis also makes is that grief is a process and that sorrow is a process. So basically it's new every day. It's not something that goes away. He describes it as a landscape that is new every day, every moment. Sometimes you think you've gotten over something and then it comes back. This book is definitely worth reading because it explores even more topics than the ones that I've just, quickly mentioned for you here. It's a great book because it's written by an author who is not afraid to ask tough questions. He's not afraid to dig deep in what he sees or some of the things he's struggling with. He doesn't pretend everything's fine. He allows himself to get angry with God, to get angry about how things have turned out, to be confused. And he allows himself to freely experience all these different stages of grief. And when you read this book, it's really helpful and very enlightening also, because some of the things you can really relate to, some of the things, that he says, and some of the questions that he asks are definitely ones that for example, I noticed I had, and so I found him very helpful. There are some quotes that I wanted to read to you because I thought they were very useful and very clever, and they just show how great of an observer C.S. Lewis is and how much wisdom there is in what he has to say. For example, when talking about whether God is good or not, he says, "What do people mean when they say, 'I'm not afraid of God because I know he's good'? Have they never even been to a dentist?" And he gives another example of a surgeon. "The kinder and more conscientious he is, the more inexorably he will go on cutting." Or when he talks about his own faith and his own beliefs, "If my house has collapsed at one blow, that is because it was a house of cards. Nothing less will shake a man out of his merely verbal thinking and his merely notional beliefs. Only torture will bring out the truth. You never know how much you really believe anything until its truth or falsehood becomes a matter of life and death to you." Here's another one where he talks about mourning and sorrow and God. "And poor C quotes to me, 'Do not mourn like those who have no hope.' What St. Paul says can comfort only those who love God better than the dead, and the dead better than themselves. God has not been trying an experiment on my faith or love in order to find out their quality. He knew it already. It was I who didn't." That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you liked this book. It's definitely worth your time. I really recommend it. And I hope to see you guys really soon. Bye!